Joe Biden, he talked about TPP last night. And I just want to say here, it's very important to remember that Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, every single corporate Democrat who has promoted trade deals, which are really simple, they're not free trade deals. They are corporate bureaucracy deals. Particularly TPP was condemned as one of multiple examples, but I'll just focus on this one for the moment. International medical activists, because it would have been a direct threat to generic drugs and readily accessible drugs for underdeveloped countries. That was one area. It would have cost a lot of lives. The investor dispute mechanism is an anti-democratic mechanism that would basically override nation states' ability to legislate environmental labor protections in favor of whatever a corporation demanded, whether it was a bank, pharmaceutical company, tobacco company, tech industry. And every single time a Democrat says that they're proposing a new kind of trade agreement or backing a new kind of trade agreement, Bill Clinton said NAFTA would have unparalleled environmental and labor standards. It did not. It led to a proliferation of sweatshops, environmental pollution. It was actually great for cartel trafficking, was a huge breakthrough in how drugs are moved into this country, and it lost a fair amount of blue-collar jobs. TPP also, and Barack Obama used the exact same rhetoric. So Joe Biden here is pretending, even though he fought his heart out while he was vice president, for TPP, even though it was anti-public health, anti-worker, anti-environment, he's pretending now that he would support something different by resorting to the same rhetoric that Democrats that try to sell these awful deals have always resorted to. Let's take a look from last night.
Vice President Biden, just to be clear, would you or would you not rejoin the TPP, yes or no?
I would not rejoin the TTIP as it was initially put forward. I would insist that we renegotiate pieces of that with the Pacific nations that we had in South America and North America so that we could bring them together to hold China accountable for the rules of us setting the rules of the road as to how trade should be conducted. Otherwise, they're going to do exactly what they're doing, fill the vacuum and run the table.
So, again, this means extremely little. As far as it being a counterweight to China, that's the prime way TPP is sold from a geostrategic standpoint. And there's two ways of answering this. One, of course, from a worker, normal person perspective, you are not in competition with China. In fact, there are some very significant overlapping interests between working people in both countries and working people internationally, obviously. Everybody, regardless of conditions, wants to get paid better, have more power over their own work lives. The other dynamic here is that, China and the United States obviously have had for quite some time now a reciprocal relationship where you basically exchange cheap sweatshop labor for incredibly cheap products. That dynamic is changing. I mean, China is now certainly a power in its own right and only going to get more so. That's just reality. I'm a big critic of many aspects of the Chinese model and foreign policy, obviously. And they've also lifted a lot of people out of poverty, and they are going to reassert their role in the world. It's a historic anomaly and oddity that China has not played a more significant role in the past couple of years. That bodes very badly in some areas. It bodes well in others, potentially. So that kind of rhetoric, though, of containing China and getting serious about IP and all of these types of things. First of all, the United States has a reciprocal relationship, obviously, between Silicon Valley and the defense establishment and so on. So that's one thing. So if you want to really deal with China in these more sort of geostrategic questions, there needs to be things like a Geneva Convention on how we deal with technology, how we deal with hacking and drones and all of these other types of issues. But, the geostrategic concerns of a very narrow set of interest is antithetical in the TPP to the lived concerns of people who work across Asia, people who need medicine, and everybody who breathes on the planet. This is Joe Biden in 2013, loving TPP.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership is perhaps the most ambitious.
He said the TTP in the last clip, and he can't say it in this clip
I think
either.
the TTP was the European version.
TTIP or something like that?
Yeah, I think so.
know.
I could be wrong,
Right.
but I think he's making some type of mistake like that.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership is perhaps the most ambitious trade negotiation underway in the world. It will break new ground on important issues, from the challenges of state-owned enterprises to ensuring the free flow of data across borders, to enhancing regional supply chains, to ensuring transparency and cutting red tape. We're also working to strengthen protections for labor and the environment. We Americans, we welcome competition. It's stamped into our DNA. It is not a problem. What we're talking about is shaping a new standard that can become the metric by which all future trade agreements are measured. You know that genuine competition pushes our companies and our people.
Stunning that he would say the free flow of information when one of the prime aspects of this is an incredibly restrictive intellectual property regime, which would, if you want, yes, it would. That's what Hollywood wants in terms of bootlegging movies.
That's free trade.
Right. That's free trade, is making sure that there aren't bootlegs in a market in Shanghai. Sure, whatever. And then, far more seriously, you're talking about IP laws that will protect pharmaceutical companies at the expense of global public health. If you go back to the late 1990s, and the Clinton administration had to reverse themselves on this because Al Gore was getting protested at every single event by activists when he was running for president. The South African government, starting to recognize in the late 90s the scale and scope of the emerging AIDS crisis, wanted to deal with generic drugs as part of their solution. The Clinton administration, at the behest of the pharmaceutical industry, threatened extreme sanctions on South Africa. And that's another great example. I mean, I don't have time, obviously, to get into the controversies around Thabo Mbeki and South Africa and AIDS, but just even consider that element of the story that has been so de-emphasized while there's been these kind of single focus on a particular leader's views of the science, which are wrong views, but that's the bigger context. So you're talking about that type of enforcement for a whole range of drugs across the globe under TPP. It's a fundamentally anti-worker bill, a fundamentally anti-public health bill, and he obviously is not talking about doing anything different. I mean, this is a very Trump move almost. This is just call it something different.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be great. You're going to love it. So, Joe Biden continues his I guess not even devolution, just his stasis.
Mendacity.
His mendacity. The 1985 Democratic Leadership Council energy. And it's not good for you folks. Not good. And also, and I say this as somebody who, again, it's like, I disagreed with Sam. I don't think him saying, don't be too hard on me, kid. I think, frankly, a lot of people find that kind of charming. You can't go after him on every single thing when you talk to a broader base of people, but I am becoming increasingly concerned watching him debate that, this guy is just absolutely not up for this. On the substance, and also on, he's not up for this. He's looking very bad up there, and I'm starting to get quite concerned about the idea of the guy being on a stage with Donald Trump.